Earlier tonight, in a sensational media bombshell, it was revealed that Huw Edwards is the BBC star at the centre of the £35,000 sex pics scandal. We must stress, still allegations at this stage. His wife released a statement on his behalf hours ago, saying that he's in hospital having suffered from severe mental health problems, which have worsened over the last few days. She also confirmed that the TV star, very much the face of the national broadcaster, was first told that there were allegations against him only last Thursday, 7 weeks after the Beeb were first made aware of them. And in the last few moments, Director General Tim Davie has sent a message to BBC staff saying this will no doubt be a difficult time for many after a challenging few days. I want to reassure you that our immediate concern is our duty of care to all involved. But is this a crisis of the BBC's making? Let me know your thoughts, dan@gbnews.com, or tweet me @gbnews, and do vote in the poll on Twitter. To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former BBC journalist Robin Aitken and another big former BBC star. Of course, she was on 5 Live at the weekends for at least 10 years. It was a brilliant show. Ex-Tory Minister Edwina Currie. Edwina, I know you wish no ill on our national broadcaster, your former employer, but your assessment of their handling of this crisis?
Oh, absolutely appalling, Mark. I mean, appalling. You know, back in May, the BBC was approached and told about this allegation we understand, by the family, and doesn't seem to have done an awful lot about it. I mean, you know, one of the first things you would do is actually speak to the person who is being accused, and you'd say, you know, this is what's being said. What's your response? And the whole thing stinks, to be honest. It's so unfair on Huw Edwards. It's so unfair on his family, who have now taken the whole thing by the scruff of its neck and put out, I thought, the most wonderfully compassionate statement. His wife is clearly a very special person indeed. But it reflects extremely badly on the BBC itself. And they seem to have been much more interested, whatever Tim Davie says tonight, they seem to be much more interested in the reputation of the Beeb itself. I mean, why would you sit on something like this? If you thought that some impropriety had been discovered, you would talk to the employee about it, especially if you thought it might have happened on your premises. It doesn't seem to have done that at all. If you're concerned about somebody's private life, then again, you have the conversation. If you think something illegal might have happened, you call in the police. That's what you do. You call in the police. Now, the police have said, nothing to see here, nothing illegal. They're satisfied. But somewhere along the line, the employer, this great national institution, Mark, which sets itself up as the arbiter of all moral behaviour in this country, is at fault, I think.
A fascinating and damning assessment from Edwina Currie. Robin Aitken, your reaction to this story. The BBC employ 22,000 people. Is it really their fault if one employee gets caught up in a set of allegations?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I don't think that Edwina's allegations about the BBC there are quite fair. After all, this is one man, and his demons were riding him hard, clearly. And he's had a breakdown, which is terrible for him and terrible for his family. I agree that there was a delay. Clearly, the initial complaint came in 7 weeks ago. But it has to be said that the BBC does get a lot of complaints all the time about various members of staff. Now, Huw Edwards was a very prominent member of staff, so you might think, well, they should have been a bit more alert about this. But look, what Huw Edwards did, and these are allegations, okay, we don't know what he did, but let's assume that there's some truth in these allegations. And by the way, I think that it's a fair assumption to say that there is some truth in them, because newspapers, in my experience, don't go out on a limb on highly libelous information like this. So let's assume there is something in these allegations.
Well, can we agree, Robin, that the allegations still stand? I think that's probably the best way to put it, that the allegations still stand and are being investigated.
They're still allegations.
Yeah.
Okay, they remain as allegations only. This is behaviour, private behaviour, by Huw Edwards. Now, the picture painted is a very unpleasant one. He has used his power and his money, allegedly, to get some young person to abase themselves for his sexual gratification.
No.
Now, I don't think that an employer can necessarily police that kind of personal behavior. I mean, they couldn't do it for you, they couldn't do it for me, obviously. This is between Huw and his own conscience. So that side of it, I don't think the BBC is culpable for in any way at all. Now, okay, there was a delay, and 7 weeks, it looks a bit tardy. But, knowing the BBC, as I do, I worked there for 25 years, anyone who's worked in the BBC knows that it's got this labyrinthine bureaucracy behind it. It's got reams and reams of management. I could imagine the way this would have sludgily moved through the system with no very speedy response to an allegation like that. So, look, I'm not saying the BBC is faultless in this. I'm sure it isn't. I mean, one thing that really they might very well be at fault, is if they had some inkling that Huw Edwards was in some way cracking up, if there were signs, and also if there were complaints internally about Edwards' behaviour towards his colleagues, and if those allegations were sat on, if those complaints by other BBC staff members were not acted on, then I think the BBC would certainly be at fault in that case. But we don't know that is true. That's what I'm saying.
Interesting. Briefly, if you can, Edwina, do you agree with Robin Aitken that really this is about Huw Edwards and his own conscience?
No, I don't. In fact, I think that's making an assumption about Huw's own behaviour, and I don't think we have any right or indeed any evidence to do that. Bearing in mind that allegations of all sorts, as Robin rightly says, get made against anybody that's in public life, and some have some substance and some have no substance whatsoever, and sometimes they are even malicious or they are based on a misunderstanding. We cannot make any assumptions at all about the allegations that have been made.
Okay.
What we can, I think, be concerned about is the way that the Beeb handle them. And indeed, if they have lots of them, they need to have a big department to handle them. And they need to handle them with a great deal more sensitivity and a great deal more speed.
OK, Robin, give me 10 seconds.
Look, I mean, forgive me, but if there was nothing in this, if there was nothing at all in this, if this was all a flight of fancy, we wouldn't be sitting here talking tonight about it. I mean, something has happened.
Okay.
And I mean, it's all very well to say, well, these are merely allegations. Okay, they are merely allegations. Okay. But if they were just groundless allegations, then actually nothing would be happening at all. As it is, the BBC has got a real crisis on its hands.
Robin, good to meet you for the first time. I look forward to our next encounter. Robin Aitken is a former top BBC journalist and a very good friend of the show, good friend of the channel, good friend of mine, former Conservative minister and ex-BBC star Edwina Currie. Edwina, I wish we had longer, but we'll pick up the conversation on a future occasion. Who do you agree with is the Huw Edwards crisis of the BBC's making? Well, Chuck says, BBC, big blundering crisis. It's not their fault, it happened, but as usual, they've made a hash of managing the crisis. Blogging Blabber on Twitter says, of course it isn't. How silly. It needs a radical shake-up, however. Billy Joe says the BBC has utterly failed their so-called complaints investigation process. Basically, they did nothing. The Sun haven't done anything wrong here, and at least they had substance in this torrid story. Well, we don't know if it is substance. They are allegations at this stage. Your verdict is now in. 64% agree that the BBC have created this crisis. 36% say they have not.